Wolverine Racing. All right, guys and gals, I've seen a lot of posts on Facebook and on the internet about people that are super confused about carburetors, especially Holley carburetors, how they work, what they do, what the pieces are. I've seen a lot of people posting how rich their carburetors are at idle. They can't get them not to be rich at idle. What jet should I use? You know, what power valve should I use? So I'm just going to go through and show you all the pieces of a carburetor, a Holley, how to do a few things. I don't know everything there is to know about tuning carburetors, but I know enough to be able to tune one. So I'm hoping this video helps some of y'all a little bit anyway. Let me know if it does. All right, let's get back to the carburetor. I'm gonna point out some things on this carburetor for mostly for you guys that are new, that are kind of beginners with this stuff. All right, these are vent tubes. That's all they do is let air into the bowl. When fuel comes in, the air's got to go somewhere. It goes out the tube or in the tube as needed. That's all these are, is vents. They don't do anything else. This is your bowl. And this is your bowl, right? Primary bowl, secondary bowl. To adjust the float on any one of these Holley style carburetors, you do it right here. You loosen this screw, the slot. This is a 5/8 hex head. You turn that hex head, not the screw. Turn the hex head down, the float goes down. You turn the hex head up, the float goes up. It's as simple as it is to adjust the float. This particular carburetor has a sight glass so that you can see the level of the fuel. Most, I won't say most, but a lot of the carburetors that you'll see just have a screw here. You take the screw out, you want the fuel to be right at the bottom of that screw opening, so that when the car's running, a little bit is coming out of the bottom of that screw hole. Not a lot, just a little bit. Put the screw back in, you're set. You shouldn't have to adjust that float again. Okay? This is your discharge pump nozzle, or squirter as a lot of people call them. There's different sizes of these. 28, 31, 33, 35, they come in all sorts of sizes. The bigger the number, the more fuel it's going to push. The smaller the number, the less fuel it's going to push. This will most of the time cure your off-idle stumble if the rest of the carburetor is set up correctly. So say you've got a 28 in here, and when you mash that throttle, you get a stumble. Okay, what this is doing is adding fuel to your carburetor in the transition when you're just opening the throttle. And it really matters when you go wide open throttle. Without that shot of fuel going in these two areas right here, you're going to stumble. So a lot of times, if you've got, say, a 28 in there, you can go to a 31 and it'll eliminate some of that stumble. Okay, same thing in the back. Most of the time, these are the same size. You can put a bigger one in the secondary side and a smaller one in the primary side, just depending on how you want to set it up. And again, the smaller the number, the less fuel. The bigger the number, the more fuel. There are cams that are driven by the linkage on the carburetor. These plastic cams right here. There's a white one on this one, you can see. That cam is what makes this lever move. The lever goes to the pump. Pump's right here. When this pump lever moves and gets pressed down, it shoots fuel out of these discharge pump nozzles. Simple as it is. That's all there is to it. This particular carburetor has 4-corner idle adjustment. Okay? There's one on each side. For the front, one on the back. There's a slotted screw on there. That's a slotted screw for a reason. So that you can tell, you can read better how many turns in or out you turn that screw. Most of the time, out of the box, if you turn it all the way in until it's snug tight, not tight. You don't want to run these in hard. Run them in gently, and you back it out 1 full turn and a half a turn, you're going to be close to where these need to be set. If you set all of these at 1.5 turn out, you're going to be close. It's not going to be exact, but you'll be close to start off with. Okay? The other thing people get confused about is the transfer slot. It's a very, very small slot. In here, you see it down in there in the bottom. There's the transfer slot. You only really want just the tip of that slot showing in most cases. Just the tip of that slot. Any more than that, if you're like this on those throttle blades, they're too far open. And it's a problem. Okay? On this particular carburetor, they have an adjustment screw for the secondary throttle blades. Some of the carburetors will not come with this screw on top. There is an Allen set screw underneath here on some of these carburetors, and that is the only way to adjust that secondary throttle blade. Alright, so if you're going to take a fuel bowl off, what do you have to do? Okay, if it's on the car and it's full of fuel, what you want to do is cut the bottom off of a Kentwood bottle. Right? You take a Kentwood or a water bottle like this, you cut about 3 inches up from the bottom, cut all the way around it, and use that as a cup. Okay? You want to take the bottom corner screw off. Have the cup underneath there with a paper towel, because fuel is going to come out. When you pull that screw, all your fuel in the bowl is going to dump out into your cup. It'll be just about empty. You take all 4 screws off. In some cases you may have to take your fuel line off, depending on how you have yours set up. I have mine set up so that I don't have to take that fuel line off. It'll stay on there. If you take all 4 of these screws off, it's very, very, very easy to do. Got one left here. Okay, so that's the bowl with the metering plate. Here's your bowl. Okay, this is your float right here. Sometimes they're made of brass, sometimes plastic, sometimes this nitrophyll stuff that is basically solid foam. All right. Your metering plate. On your metering plate, you're going to have a power valve, especially in the front on the primary side. You put a fresh power valve in there with a gasket, tighten it up, you're done. The other side, you got your jets. This is the vent tube. This connects the airflow to this vent tube. All right, that's all it's doing. It's allowing the air from the vent tube to come into the fuel bowl. That's all that's for. All right. If you guys are going to change jets, it's very simple. One there, one there. Pull them out, put them in. Set that back on there just like that, and bolt your fuel bowl back on. Okay. You can pretty much eyeball your float in there. And if it's about level, you're going to be close when you put it back in. To change one of those, it's real easy. There's 2 screws in the back. Pop those 2 screws off. There's a spring in there with a little rod that it hangs on. Take it off and swap that out. Not too often do you need to change those. Sometimes when they get old, they'll absorb fuel and get heavy, which will make them sink more, and it'll make your fuel bowl overrun. Needle and seat. Needle and seat's inside here, guys. All right, it's real simple. You take this off, you unscrew this nut, the needle and seat comes out, and I will show you. Needle and seat. Unscrew the screw, the nut simply lifts off. It just sits on top of that needle and seat like that. Unscrew the needle and seat. That's it. There's your needle. Your seat's in there. Okay? All this does, it's a valve. It's a one-way valve, right? If you have too much fuel pressure, the pump will overcome this needle and it will continually fill your bowl. So your fuel pressure should be between 4 and 6 pounds. I know everybody wants to crank it up to 7, 8, 9. You don't need it. 4 pounds is all you need. You can run the car on 3 and it'll run perfect. 4 pounds, 4.5 pounds is all you need. And I'm talking about a pretty fast car. You can run a 5-second car on 4 pounds of fuel pressure. No problem. Okay? Goes back in, screw it down. You set your nut back on top of it. This is what you adjust it with. Remember, you screw it down, the float goes down. You screw it up, the float comes up. This screw basically is all it's for is to lock that nut in place. When you're done, you tighten this up and it locks that nut where it's supposed to be and keeps the needle and seat set there. Very simple, guys, very simple. If you've got fuel dripping out of these discharge tubes, then more than likely that float is set too high. That's the first thing I would check. That is the first thing. You should never have fuel dripping out of these while you're at idle. You should never have fuel dripping out of those, okay? If you've got fuel dripping out of those at idle, chances are good your float's set too high. All right, this is one of my carburetor setups. It's a 750 Brawler. It runs great. It's on a 355 with some Dart aluminum heads. It's got about 10.5 to 1 compression. That 750 runs great on this motor, okay? I like to plumb mine one line for each bowl. Come all the way back to my regulator, and then a bigger line going back to my pump. This is a return style system, but the return is off the pump, okay? That 750 is set up just like any other Holley carburetor. Like I said, 1.5, you screw this all the way in till it's snug. Don't over tighten it. 1.5 turns out on each one. That's going to get you really close. Now, when you go to fine tune it to get it exact, you can do it 2 ways. You can do it 3 ways. You can do it by ear once you get to know this stuff. Vacuum gauge on manifold vacuum is one of the ways to do it when you don't know, how to do this by ear. So you put the vacuum gauge on manifold vacuum, you turn this in 1/2 turn, watch your vacuum. You want to turn these in or turn them out until you get the most vacuum, the highest vacuum reading on your vacuum gauge, okay? Don't go thinking you're going to get a big move on that gauge, because you're not. It's going to be very, very minute, very small. It should be very small, otherwise you got something else wrong, right? 1/2 turn in, half a turn in on this one. Let it run for a few minutes. See where that vacuum gauge settles out. The other way you can do it is with your tack. You can use that tack right there and try and get the highest RPM reading you can at idle. Remember, that is only for setting idle. Screwing it in leans the car out. It takes fuel away from the idle circuit. That's all this does. Doesn't do anything else. It's strictly for idle, okay? You're not changing jets is not going to affect your idle. It's only going to affect your drivability and your wide open throttle. So don't go for jets if your car is idling and it's fouling plugs, or you smell fuel, or your car's running so rich you can smell gas in the car. You got another problem. The other thing everybody needs to remember, because I've seen a lot of confusion on the internet about carburetors, is it may not be your carburetor. When was the last time you changed your spark plugs, your wires, your cap, your rotor, checked your timing? All that other stuff has to be right, or tuning your carburetor is going to be useless. So get those other things right. And it doesn't matter, you know, your plugs might be a month old, but they might be fouled. If you were having problems running rich before you went into this carburetor or before you bought a new carburetor, chances are good those plugs are shot. Put a new set in it. It's worth it to start out with a fresh set. You know, the other thing you want to check if you're running rich at idle is your power valve, or if something inside that carburetor is not tight, is loose, or doesn't have a gasket in it. Those things can cause fuel to leak in. But remember, there should never be fuel coming out of these discharge nozzles, these boosters right here, while you're at idle. When you hit the throttle, you should get fuel out of these, but there shouldn't be any fuel coming out of them at idle. Depending on your camshaft, your motor, your compression ratio, your motor may need to idle at, you know, 800 or 1,000. Your motor may need to idle at 1,700. I've got a 436 and an 81 Camaro, and that thing idles at 1,750 in park. You put it in drive and it's 1,000. It has to be idled up high. It's the camshaft, it's the compression ratio, it's the heads, it's all those things. Remember, what makes fuel come out of these boosters is vacuum. So when you open the throttle, you create vacuum, sucks air through here, because it's all this motor is an air pump. Sucks air in and pushes out the exhaust. That's what it does. So when it opens, it sucks air, creates vacuum, and that's what pulls the fuel out of these boosters. You should not get fuel out of those otherwise at idle. The air bleeds are a whole nother topic of discussion. Out the box, 99% of these carburetors are going to have the right air bleeds in them. You may need to fine tune it a couple numbers here or there, but that's really fine tuning it. Most of the time, that's going to be correct out the box. I hope this helped you guys. Wolverine out.